John o' Groats is probably the most famous of all places in Caithness. People have been doing the 874-mile Land's End to John o' Groats trek for many years, whether by car, motorbike, cycling, walking, or even by means of the world's fastest shed. Close to Duncansby Stacks and Duncansby Head, and not far from the most northerly tip of Scotland at Dunnet Head, John o' Groats has a population of around 300. But it was its position on the Pentland Firth and proximity to Orkney that led to Dutch entrepreneurs Jan de Groot and his two brothers, Malcolm and Gavin, to set up a ferry service to the newly annexed Orkney Islands in the late 15th century. James III had acquired Orkney and Shetland in 1472 as a dowry from King Christian of Norway and Denmark, as his daughter Princess Margaret was betrothed to him, but her impoverished father couldn't afford the cash dowry payment. This meant William Sinclair, 1st Earl of Caithness, was forced to relinquish his Norse Earl of Orkney title, and was given Ravenscraig Castle at Kirkcaldy in Fife as compensation. Following James's death, his son James IV decided to grant the de Groots permission to carry out the ferry service, which was in Crown hands, in order to ensure the island's security and trade in 1496. In a letter to the Earl of Caithness, the king requested he grant sufficient land to the de Groots so they could live there, and in return, payment was to be 3 measures of malt annually. Land was either purchased or obtained by the family by royal charter between Wares and Duncansby in the Caithness district, and split equally between the 3 brothers. It wasn't unusual for de Groot and his passengers to dispute the ferry fares, until eventually a local magistrate intervened and the king set the fare at 4p, or a groot or groat, equivalent to 2 pence, for each passenger. According to legend, every year on the anniversary of their landing in Scotland, and to celebrate their good fortunes, the de Groots, which had by this time split into 8 families, held a dinner party. But as the years went by, Jan de Groot saw trouble brewing. One year a quarrel ensued as to which of his sons could sit at the head of the table. It could have led to a fatality if the old man hadn't stood up and demanded they stop arguing, saying he would resolve the issue by the time of their next annual dinner. He'd had enough experience of how men saw themselves and had been forced to resolve disputes when he worked the ferry. He saw this as no different. He told them that if they didn't respect one another, their neighbours, who had treated them with respect until then, would come and take their lands from them and throw them out of the county. They left quietly and went to their respective homes. Keeping his promise, the old man built an octagonal room, complete with 8 doors and 8 windows, 1 on each side, so they could each enter by their own door and sit in their own space at the purpose-built octagonal table. This meant no single member of the family was head of the table, and there was no dispute about rank. The status quo had been restored, and they all got on well together once more. The house which Jan had built was situated near the former John o' Groats Hotel, which is also octagonal, paying homage to the original 16th century house, the remains of which are said to still exist under the sand. This story first appeared in the statistical account of 1793, when Dr. Morrison, The parish minister relayed it. He got the information from John Sutherland at Wester, in the parish of Wick, around 50 years before, as he said his father, who was by then an old man, had actually seen the letter written by James IV in the hands of George Groat of Wales. Whether it's true or not, it's certainly the case the de Groots were in possession of lands at Duncansby and Weirs. They did run a ferry service, and local records show the family of Groot did indeed live in the area in 1496, with the name frequently occurring in Caithness records. One Groot descendant of note was John Groat, who in 1702 held the land at Duncansby and was Commissioner of Supply for Caithness. The octagonal table too existed, as many locals inscribed their names on it, and the story passed down the generations. As Jan grew older, he began to refuse to ferry people between Caithness and Orkney, and always dreaded having a minister on board. Legend has it, he refused a minister once, and he was so incensed the clergyman jumped the 12 remaining miles and left his footprints on the rocks where he landed. This is said to have had a profound effect on Jan, and is said to have hastened his death. Jan de Groot is buried in Caithness churchyard 2 miles away, although his headstone was moved inside to protect it from the weather. It was inscribed by his son Donald, who laid me here April 13th day, 1568. The ferry service run by the de Groots continued for over 250 years, until Jan de Groot's descendant, Malcolm Groot, went bankrupt in 1741. Today, ferry services continue to run between John o' Groats and Berwick on South Ronaldsay, just like the original ferry service, more than 500 years ago. If you enjoyed this episode of Scotland's History, please like, comment and subscribe. Until next time, thank you for watching.